Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and this is Call to Create. And I am so thrilled to share with you our guest today, Camille Fronk Olson. Welcome today.
Thank you.
So happy to have her. I was telling her before we started, I'm trying not to fangirl because I have read this woman's work for years. And if you want scholarly yet layman's terms way of being able to get into the scriptures, especially about and for women, this is your gal. Now I'm going to read her official bio, but I got to throw a couple of things in on the way of how much I have been able to utilize and been benefited, and so many people have, from her writings and her journey. And that's what we're going to share today, especially for those of you out there who want to write nonfiction, anything to do that has scripture relation or about scriptures. This is going to be so helpful for you to watch and see this unique journey unfold, because that's all of our journeys. It's unique and it's a fingerprint for us, and to rejoice in that, not trying to be a cookie cutter. So Camille Fronk Olson is a professor emeritus of ancient scripture and a former department chair at Brigham Young University. She received the Carl G. Mazur Excellence in Teaching Award, which, as you know, we would covet if we covet, but it's the university's highest recognition for teaching. She holds an MA in Ancient Near Eastern Studies and a PhD in the Sociology of the Middle East from BYU. She also served with her left toe, apparently, on the Young Women General Board and on the church's Teacher Development Curriculum Committee. She is a popular speaker and author, and published works of hers include Women of the Old Testament and New Testament. My personal favorites, Don't Walk, Run to the nearest store and get those. I cannot even tell you how much I gleaned from those, and the scriptures just exploded for me with those. But she also has written In the Hands of the Potter, Mary, Martha, and Me, and Too Much to Carry Alone. In her spare time, she loves to travel, garden, and research stories about her ancestors, and she is married to the lucky Paul Olson, which includes the blessing of 2 children and 4 grands. We are so happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Let's just start right in because, I have so many juicy questions. But first and foremost, I'm going back through all of this on your bio, and I'm thinking, where did this start for you? Because you seem to get it early, this love of the scriptures, especially women in the scriptures, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you're Tremont in Utah, and you end up a professor at the BYU Jerusalem Center. Like, who does that? So tell us, take us back to the beginning.
Well, I never dreamed of doing anything unusual. I grew up very traditional kind of environment, and for the most part, people would, girls my age would go to college and in the first year meet someone, marry, and drop out. And there's something that just struck me there after a quarter or two of college. I was in quarter era back then, that I had to finish. I had to do a degree, and I didn't care what it was in. I just couldn't stand just starting and not finishing. And I was so afraid that somehow I'd get married before I was able to finish. And so I did hunker down. I won't go to the details, but I ended up doing it in 3 years. And it was just strictly because I wanted to finish. And it ended up in education because I changed majors. I had changed majors every quarter for 6 quarters. And they told me I could graduate in 3 years. And I last year take all these, last important classes. And so that's what I did. So I'm 21 and I've just graduated from college, and I have no desire to go into a career. And yet no one's there knocking at my door wanting to marry me. I'm here to tell you. And it's at that point that my bishop calls me in to serve a mission. I just turned 21, and I didn't know any girls my age who were serving or wanted to serve a mission. And I go, no, thank you.
Yeah, that was way back in the day when that was sort of taboo. Like, you're what? Yeah.
It's so funny because back then people say girls who serve missions, no guy wants to marry them. Mm-hmm. And now I listen today, and so many say, unless a girl goes on a mission, a guy won't want to marry you. And I go, give these young women a break. But that was a major turning point for me in my whole life, was just the fact it was the first time I'd encountered a crossroads where I had various opinions. My bishop and my mother wanting me to go, my dad saying, no, you'll never get married if you go on a mission. And I really deep down, I just assumed not. Thank you very much. I thought I'd be so old when I got back. You'd be 22 and a half when you came back.
BYU is, Methuselah. Yeah.
But it was one of those, for the first time, I learned about answers to prayer for me personally. It wasn't easy. It took a long time. It took a lot of learning to listen. And when I finally got the answer, I realized he had been telling me all along, but I didn't know how to recognize it. But it was to go. And for me, just answering, it took faith. And I went to one of the hardest missions. I mean, we were told it was the lowest baptizing mission in the church, with the exception of the international mission that was then headquartered in Tehran, Iran. So we did not see tremendous success.
And that was just interject. That was Toulouse, France. Is that right?
Yes. Southern France, and a lot of rejection, but I learned to do hard things. And I can't say it was fun. I can't say at all it was easy, but it changed my life. And I came home as kind of a really a rarity as a returned sister missionary. And it's at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do. I went back to take a couple of classes at the university, and this is up at Utah State. And the director of the institute there knew about me just simply because I'd been a missionary. And he said, would you ever consider teaching seminary full-time? And I go, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, how embarrassing is that to tell your friends you're going to teach? I mean, that just seemed like geek of all geeks. and so, but again, I learned this idea of praying, and I knew so many times it's when the Lord answered me, and it was something I didn't want to do, but it came through so loud and clear. I knew it wasn't me saying it. I knew it. Anyway, long story short, I said yes, and I thought I'd try it for a year. And I was the only woman teaching full-time seminary in the entire church at that time. Can you believe it?
Because I can. And we were just mentioning right before this, I remember even my day, I was in the seminary program, and still there was only, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 women at that time. So that's even, a little bit farther down the path. So you're looking at this whole flywheel turning of women changing their view, and then people entrenched in those environments changing their view. Tell us what that was like going into those things as that first time.
Yeah, there's no role model as far as that. I remember even before I taught my first class, we're having all these meetings with all the teachers in the district or whatever. And I remember young men that weren't that much older than I, that had been teaching just a couple of years, but they're talking, we're trying to figure out why they hired you. I mean, there's no feeling of shame or embarrassment. They just said, why would they hire you? And the only reason we can think of is to protect the church from a discrimination lawsuit. I mean, that was
confidence there, but I can see it pragmatically spoken. Like, we're just trying to make sense of this. Oh, my goodness. And your gracious response. Wow.
So that was, that's the way it started. And I remember that first year, it was Old Testament. I'd never read the whole Old Testament. I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought, though, I've got to do this, because I felt suddenly there was something I needed to do representing all women. And I thought, I don't need to do this forever, but I need to do something well enough that they would have confidence to continue to hire women. And so I thought I was going to do it that year. And then at the end of the year, I thought, I just can't stop after 1 year, because that looks really lame. So I said I would do it a second year. And then towards the end of the second year, they said if I would teach 3 years, they would finance a trip to the Holy Land for all teachers. You have to teach 3 years, and they would send you over there with spouses, which I didn't have. And that's a whole other story. But I wanted to do that. So I thought, I can do it another year. So I did it 3 years. And then it was, that was an investment. You need to teach for, I don't know, it was like 2 more years or something, because we invested in you and sending you over there.
Right.
But there was something at going over there and seeing that land, there was a connection, and something happened. And I came back then, I said, if I'm going to be here a couple of years, they were very generous in seminaries and institutes. And they financed a master's degree if you would, want to do one through BYU. And they had one just for a short time, a master's degree. They were just starting on Near Eastern studies. And so I go, well, sure, perfect. So that's when I first met some of the faculty at BYU that would one day be some of my colleagues. It was just fascinating the way that just happened, and became good friends. I mean, I studied over in Jerusalem one semester. Me and 16 married men, and me there, that was just kind of my life.
Those people that you sat around the table that were on the videos at BYU, Andrew Skinner and all those people. I mean, look at how you fell into this. I remember reading your blog that talked about the autumn of your life or whatever, and saying that marriage didn't drop in your lap like you thought it would, but all of this career path, along the way, these steps just kept falling into place. And I want to talk about that for just a second, because you had to be this forerunner in so many situations that are a generally male-infused situation, right? Just by nature of the tradition of it. Mm-hmm. And you're not married. So can you speak to two things? One, how did you navigate being a woman in that environment? Because so many women are dealing with that right now. Mm-hmm. And second, what did that do for you in preparing for the opportunity later in life that was unexpected for you to be able to be married? So let's go to the first one first. What was that? What did you learn about leadership and women and working with men in those situations?
Oh, I don't know. I learned that there were a lot of stereotypical expectations, and there were certain things that it was okay for me to do, but other things that it was not appropriate. And I found myself questioning. It's the first time I started really saying, now, why is this? Why couldn't a woman be in that position? And they'd give me the explanation, and I'd say, well, that doesn't make sense, because look at this. And I started recognizing, they were saying, one of them, I remember saying something like, you used to be just so quiet and, whatever we'd say. And I think I learned my sass, I think, in that I felt like, again, having to speak for all women, I felt like that so many times. That no, that's not right. But in so doing, I also felt increasingly, I didn't think about it, but I realized it was in there, that I was very intimidated about the idea of ever being considered a leader among those men. That was just never a possibility. I used to say testimonies aren't that strong, around to be able to handle that, but that wasn't it. I had been told when I was on that general board, there were regional leaders that one of them once said to me when I was assigned to teach young men and young women leaders in a training session, that the regional leader said, no, not the young men leaders. What can a woman ever teach men? And that kind of idea, I think, I tried not to say I believed that. I didn't believe it, but I think it had an effect on me. I learned you just cannot just sit back and wait for things to happen. And then when they asked me to be department chair over our department of like 35 faculty, and there's a couple of us that are women, and I go, I can't do that. And it was pushes from a few individuals that said, you have to. This is an important thing, again, for all women. You need to do this.
Exactly. And that's the thread that I'm seeing and I'm gathering in. And again, this is not a diss on any particular gender or not. This is a way of thinking. And I think President Nelson is absolutely genius at blasting these self-imposed barriers or these traditional views that are not scripturally bound often, and that it's perspectives, it's the way it's always been done. It takes both genders to be able to break those molds and say there's a better way to do this, and the Lord's asked us to do it that higher, holier way. I keep hearing this thread from you of this higher purpose. It was for other women. You are bridging and building those bridges for the women coming after you. And what a gift, because someone has to do that. Once there's knowledge, once there's awareness, then people can choose to shift the behaviors. But there has to be that breakthrough, that pioneer person that makes that happen. And, we don't usually volunteer for that. It's usually someone rises to that call, whether you like it or not, and you have. So as you're going through this, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine the policies you're having to deal with, the conversations you're having to have, and the ability to not get offended.
Well, I did see before I finished teaching seminary, I taught 8 years. And by the end of that, they had been hiring other women. And they would tell me that my example had made a difference, which made me think again, it's not just doing what I feel like was right, but doing it in a way that would cement in their minds that I am faithful, I am anchored, and my purposes are the same as what their purposes are. And that helping us all to not be offended or feel threatened or misunderstood because someone has a different perspective than they do.
That is beautiful. In fact, when I was interviewing Laurel Day, president of Deseret Book, she was talking about Sherry Dew and how Sherry Dew paved that way so incredibly and so beautifully in that realm of just, again, opening up mindsets, opening up different ways of doing things. And now you look at Jean Bingham's talk a couple of years ago about being united in the way that we work to accomplish the Lord's work, how it has to be these different, not even just men and women, but diversity in thought and approach and opinion, and being able to be united in the Lord, but not losing any of that fingerprint. So kudos to you. You're being very gracious about the impact that you've had, but I have no doubt the reason why I could be hired as an ops seminary seminary teacher is because of women like you and Sherry Dew that had paved that way and made it a new norm. I want to shift the gears if I can, but this is just, I could talk for hours with you about that. So let's go to that second point of, you're unmarried in a culture and a church that is very strong about marriage and family. I'm a single mom right now. So tell me how that was for you. You were feeling at one juncture like, I don't even know if that's going to be in the Lord's plan for me, but you're moving forward in this. And I'm sure you've had pushback and feedback from people as you're flourishing in your career, people having different views about what that would look like for you. Any thoughts for people listening on that?
Yeah. And what I thought was, it really made me pause because so many of the pushback came from other women. Mm-hmm. And I remember being down in the South speaking at a Know Your Religion, and some women came up to me afterwards and saying, we teach early morning seminary and we're feeling really bad that we don't know the scriptures as well as you do. But then we thought, well, we did what the prophet told us to do, and that was marry and have a family. And so that's of greater importance. But they were struggling all through my talk that they hadn't done what I had done. And there was a moment there I thought, I shouldn't go out and speak anymore. If this is what my speaking and what I have done, how it affects women who made the choice to marry and be home with their children and question that decision, I'm not doing anything to help. And I went through that for just a little while, and then I went back, and that's why I go back to this. I knew this is the path that the Lord had sent me on. And if I didn't know that, I would get tripped up multiple times. But knowing that made me push through and saying, that is not my decision. And so when I heard then later some fellow teachers saying that their wives were concerned because it was at a time when, like Sherry and Wendy Watson at the time and I were speaking at different conferences, and we were all single, and they're saying, why does the church promote single women when they're not doing what the Lord told them to do? And again, you go through this, and I said, I remember just saying, would you please go home and tell your wives to pray and ask God if this is what he wants them to do. And if it isn't, then tell him to get going and doing what he does. But until you know that what your choices are is with his will, you will always feel threatened or jealous or upset or offended by what some other woman has done. And that's not what the purpose is. We are each very different and are sent on different paths. And it's what we can do collectively because of those different paths that makes us such a powerful force for good.
Oh my goodness, goosebumps up and down my arms. I'm sure listeners are going to feel that same way. I cannot even express how much I agree with that. President Ballard, I think, was asked, can a woman ask the same question and get two different answers? Should I stay at home or should I pursue my career or whatever? And he said, yes, absolutely. Ava Weitzman in her talk, Women in Education, a Future Only God Could See, talks about 3 different women getting different answers about their higher education. And I think you nailed it right there. When we are sure about what we're to do, and President Nelson is genius again about his emphasis is on those 2 things, purpose and identity. Because when we know who we are and what we're to do, we settle down. We're happy for other people. We put our time and energy into what the Lord wants us to do, which takes plenty. And we don't have time to judge or put a lens on someone else. I love that you went back to what you knew to be true. And that reminds me of Elder Holland's talk, that cast therefore not away thy confidence, where he says, once that revelation's been given, don't doubt it. You move forward on it, and then you'll keep getting those confirmations, which you obviously did. So you're moving on, you're in your 40s, and then suddenly.
Yes, at the time I would least expect it. Well, should I tell you something? I think this, this is very personal, but it was another of those really shift moments for me, because I'd been praying about marriage and family all my life, but it hadn't paralyzed me or upset me because I could feel that I was on this path that the Lord wanted me to be on. But I got an answer to a prayer, which I don't get detailed answers to prayers. I don't get paragraph or word. This one actually was a diagram. I'm sitting at my kitchen table and I get this saying, it's like the Lord is telling me, this is the path you've always thought you would be on, but this is the path I've sent you on. And it's a wonderful path and you've loved it, but you think you're going to find a shortcut and you're going to come over here and then join right up over here. And I'm going, yeah. And then it was this is the path I called you to. If you get married, if it will be someone who will join you on your path, who will support you on your path. It just blew me away because it was so unexpected. And yet it was so welcoming. I just think when an answer comes from God, it almost always is something that you don't expect. I mean, not what you've thought of yourself, but it is so welcoming, even though when it seems to be exactly opposite of what your dream is. I just felt thrilled because it tells me he is aware of me and he wants me to do this and he's going to support me in this. And so I just need to trust him and keep going there.
And keep going. How validating, how enlivening when you can see, and I know what you're talking about, and I'm sure people listening feel that same way. It's not the answer you expected. It's not the answer maybe you even wanted, but it sits right. Like he gets you and you get it and you go click. Yes, I get the rightness of it. It's like your soul already knew it and you just needed to get your mind, body, like together and clicked in. And I love that it seems to me after that, you probably just kind of let go of a lot of that angst or worry or, thing in the background of it and just let it be. Is that what happened?
Yes, but I could easily see some guys that I was dating, why it would never work because the last thing they wanted was to support me on this path.
Yeah. How fantastic that you could see that so clearly. And now
it was clear. And then all of a sudden, here comes Paul at it. And I go, no. And he just broke all of those molds and just, when people found out that we were spending time together, they'd say, doesn't she intimidate you? And he'd say, why? She knows scriptures better than I do, but I know more about eyes than she does. He's an ophthalmologist. And I go, I like this guy, and he was so comfortable with who he was. He wasn't trying to make me into something that would make him something different. And so people, when we finally got married, and people found out about it, they say, oh, isn't this hard, especially when you wait so long before you marry? And I'm going, hard? It was the easiest thing I ever did. And so I came up with this. Marriage is easy. Growing up is hard. And I just think so often marriage coincides at the same time you're growing up, and it gets the blame for all the rough times. But see, I kind of waited till I we both had grown up and we've learned to appreciate different things, and we're not threatened by things that we are not. And I go, there hasn't been a hard day of this marriage. It's been almost 20 years. I'm telling you. I go, so wonderful. And his kids, he's got the best kids. I just love them. I mean, people say, oh, it shouldn't be like that. Well, I don't know, but it is. It's fabulous.
And how beautiful that you get that, and that you found someone who gets that, and now you are more together. That's just gorgeous. Oh my goodness. This is just, honestly, there's so much that I want to talk to you about. I do want to shift the gear for a second as we go on this sort of Disney high of like, oh, this is so beautiful and lovely. Let's go to the experiences that made you become that way and grow you up in these ways so that you were prepared for that time. And I am just drawn to your time in the Middle East. From Tremont, I'm not trying to keep bringing that up. It's a traditional path. And then you find yourself a professor at the Jerusalem Center, I mean, in that land that is the opposite in all things. And you've got where the Savior walked and men standing with Uzis and, AK-47s. And I'm just saying, oh my goodness, talk to us about that experience, how it impacted you personally and your study of the scriptures.
Well, I love travel. I always have, but it is the people as much as anything. And you come to know people who live in those lands, and you recognize they aren't so terribly different. I mean, there's a lot. In fact, sometimes I feel like I relate to people who are out of this country more than I do sometimes in my own country. There's something about where we become much more open when you're meeting people from a different country. And I did, and I studied Palestinians specifically, and they were so gracious because they couldn't believe someone really cared and even knew about them to want to study them in that way. And you see their struggles, and yet the courage that they show in very difficult circumstances, and how important family was to them and is to them. Anyway, I guess so much of it is not being so turned off by different cultures or frightened by them, but opening an understanding of how those different cultures can open up meaning in the scriptures, for example. And you go into the Bible, and maybe especially the Old Testament, where the cultures are so different. And instead of saying, this is weird and I don't get this, it is looking at the individuals that are there and some of the feelings they have that are the same feelings I have, and how they navigated difficult circumstances, independent about what the culture was. And so there is that idea of the culture, geography. I love maps. My students at BYU would go, we have to do a map. And I go, one day you're going to travel over there and you'll be so glad to get some of this geography down, but to understand distances and to understand just personalities of different areas. But it is true, there's nothing like being there and seeing it and recognizing there's some of those few places where you can honestly say, I walked today where Jesus walked. And you get the terrain, and you get a feeling of the distance of walking in sandaled feet.
In altitude, and yes.
And you go, this really happened. These are not just nice faith promoting stories. These things really happened. These people really lived. And I get so excited as I think about that and think about them and trying to help others see them as living people who were normal, everyday human beings who did courageous and noble and very difficult things for the good of others. Very selfless. I just think I can be better. It motivates me to be a better disciple of Christ because of that.
I love that. That goes back to that theme that keeps being threaded of turn around and build the bridge for others and make it a better experience for others. You look at a Rebecca or you look at a Sariah, right? The things they had to do. And I love when you bring up these women in the scriptures and their everyday concerns. I was mentioning the daughters of Zelophehad. Is that how you say
Yeah,
it?
Zelophehad, I call them Moloters, Ahogladoa, and Milcah. Yeah.
There we go. Oh my gosh, ripping those off. When you outlined that of how they presented this new option for a solution to the law, it was practical, it was clear, they were level-headed, they weren't being all emotional about it. They went and presented it, and actually Moses changed it, if I have this correct. But I look at that and I'm thinking, they're dealing with similar things. And it doesn't matter if they're making, loaves out of a clay oven or if they're sticking them in a microwave. It's the same kind of principle, and the courage and the savvy, the knowledge they had to get, the support of being around other women and saying, I think we can do this differently, and making it better for everyone around them and coming after them. I think that's a woman's way. I really think that is the inner call that we feel, is to how can we improve the situation and make it better. And I love that that's what you've shown in the scriptures.
Well, and I love what you're just saying is in concert with other women. I just think some of the greatest progress has come as women work together. And I think about women in my life who were just there at a right time. I'll try to give you one example. Ardith Cap, when she called me to be on her general board, I didn't even know what a general board was. Here I am in my early 30s, and I'm just going, what is this? But she had gathered a group of women, both as in her presidency and on the board, that were different, each one different, but strong in very specific ways. And I recognized she had called women who had skills and abilities that she didn't have. And she wasn't threatened by that. It was the first time I was in a group of women where we were asked to use our intellect and our spiritual acumen and insight to build something, to give our very best, instead of kind of saying that's not appropriate. I was encouraged to be who I really am and what I could possibly contribute from my mental, scholarly endeavors, and not try to be embarrassed by that. And it had a profound effect on me because I didn't know, I had never seen that modeled. And I didn't recognize that until years later. And then after Sister Cap was released, then Sister Hales, as she was then, Jeanette Hales was called, and she called 3 of us from Sister Cap's board to help out with her and be the first ones on her board during a year interim as they were getting up and starting. And we got all kinds of assignments that I don't know if typically I would have had all over, a lot of different places and a lot of different circumstances that, again, it did something that she had confidence in me to represent her and to represent the church in that general way that was profound. They both remained with me as dear friends and encouraged me and wrote letters as I was going to BYU and opening doors for me there. I will forever praise their names for the example they were to me and the encouragement they gave me to do what I then learned God was wanting me to do all along, instead of fighting against it and feeling like somehow that doesn't match what we had in mind for what we want to do.
Oh, this is so gorgeous. And I think your beautiful contribution with such grace and such curiosity of being able to say, okay, I'll do that. I'll try that. Now you being that example for other women to look to and say, well, if she can do that, then I can do that. I love what you have shared about this collaborative effect and influence of other people. If you are chomping at the bit and saying, where can I get her writings? Check Deseret Book, Amazon. And if you would like to connect with her, you can do it through us, through LDSPMA. But we will also put links in the show notes and to some of your articles, which are fantastic. So user-friendly to be able to read and understand and apply the scriptures in a beautiful way. We are wrapping up our time together. Do you have one last thing you would love to share with people that you haven't been able to share? Is there one last thought or tip or something that's on your heart about people who are saying, I want to get a book out there. I want to teach the scriptures and do it in a way that will benefit other people. I want to move forward in my purpose. Is there anything that comes to mind in your personal journey that's really stood out?
I would ask what my motivation is for wanting to write this book. And if it is, there's something there that you want to share to help others to either come to Christ, to be a better disciple, or to become more the person you know he wants you to be. Something that we would each be able to give our best that God has given to us to help others. I don't know. I didn't say that very well, but
I know what you're saying though.
If you find out why, if it's only to get your name out there, that may not be enough to really bring about something that is going to be beneficial. But if there is something that is more selfless that you have in mind, I believe then you get that calling from the Lord and you go at it and you write and you rewrite and you say, oh, this is too hard, or this is taking too long. If it's right then, it is right now, to quote Elder Holland, and you just keep at it. And one day you'll have something, and who knows how broadly it will go, but guaranteed it will be of benefit. It will bless someone else's life. And you will be glad you have done it, and you would have been doing a service to all of us. So keep it up. Don't give up.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that is bookending this whole theme and this unexpected thread of do it for that higher purpose, right? Just keep doing it. The three phrases that I love that you said were, I've never dreamt of doing anything but the traditional, and do it for those coming after you. And I learned my sass. I love those. Thank you so much for your time today, Camille. This is one I'm going to go back and re-listen to. So much good stuff. Thank you for spending time with us today and sharing these pearls of wisdom.
Thank you, Connie.
And for those listening, if you love this interview like I just did, you can go and rate, review, and subscribe. You can get more into your inbox. Lots of people that we've talked to and interviewed that are sharing beautiful things, tips and tools for your creative journey. Jenny Oakes Baker, Lisa Valentine Clark, Gerald Lund, all of these people doing this for you to help you know your calling to create.